Part 3 is just a few things to be aware of when you're using queries so that you don't accidentally break something. There are 2 rules, and if you get these 2 rules, you should be golden. First rule is the rule of adjacent columns, and I already kind of alluded to that in that when I build a query like the one I had, the first 2 columns were the query, account number and account title, and the next 2 columns are formulas. And those formulas will automatically copy down to any new rows that get inserted when that query refreshes. But there is kind of some rules about what makes that actually work. And this is that's what's described here. So for a formula, like my TSG amount formula, to copy down to a new row, it has to, the column reps to the left of it, there has to be a column in the query, like in this case, the account title, or it has to be another formula that already satisfies this rule. So I have a graphic that kind of explains this a little better. So let's say in this case, the gray columns in the query range are coming from the query. I inserted smack dab in the middle of that a formula, which is fine. Well, that formula is fine because the column to the left of it is in the query. So that formula copies down, no problem. I have some other columns off to the right of the query, and those formulas also copied down because this one, the column to the left, is the query. This formula, the column to the left, is a formula that satisfies the rule, and so on and so forth. Or another way to think about it is if I just go left to right, query, query, formula, query, formula, formula. There's no break in there. So everything is continuous. All the formulas copy down, no problem. We look at this being done incorrectly, where I have a break, and this can even be like even some static value you typed in, or just an empty column. This is broken. So when I refresh the data, let's say the number of rows goes from 7 to 10 because I've added some new accounts. So I refresh the data, now I have the query going all the way down to row 10. Well, column C gets copied down because it satisfies the rule. Column E gets copied down, it satisfies the rule. There's a break, so column G doesn't satisfy the rule. Column to the left of that doesn't touch anything. So these formulas continue to stop at row 7. And so if you've worked with Office Connector or just queries in Excel in general, you might have experienced stuff like that before. And that's what drives that, is this rule of adjacent column. And if I really intended for column F to be blank, just make it a formula. Equal, double quote, double quote. And it looks blank on the screen, but it's still a formula, and it still satisfies the rule then. So that's an important aspect to think about when you're really building anything in Office Connector. It's just this rule of how formulas are designed to copy down. Okay, so the second rule to be aware of, and again, I have a nice little graphic for this too, is this comes into play when we have, particularly like this example of a financial statement where I might have stacked queries. What I mean by that is there's one query below another, et cetera. I have a query giving me a list of all my income accounts. Then several rows below that, I have another query giving me a list of all my cost accounts, and below that, expense accounts, and so forth. I have multiple queries in the same worksheet, and they're all kind of stacked on top of each other vertically. And that's not a problem, because one query will push the other ones down when it expands. So in a case like this, the query on top has 5 rows, and when I refresh the data, if more rows need to be added, it pushes the other one down, the appropriate number of rows. So that works just fine. Where this can break is if we have an unequal number of columns, okay? And you can fix this. This is pretty easy to address too. So if I have an unequal number of columns, all that's going to happen is the top query is only going to push down the things that are below columns A through E, which is not what I want because it creates this kind of mess over here that I then have to go figure out how to clean up afterwards. I want to avoid that. And the easiest way to avoid it is just kind of to extend the bounds of that top query. Equal double quote returns a blank. You don't even see it on the screen, but it's still a formula, and it's adjacent to the query. So it's considered to be kind of like part of the query now. So when that query expands, it pushes down the queries below it as you would want. Okay? So we try to keep the number of columns equal when we have queries stacked on top of each other. And the reason I bring this up in this class is because, again, financial statements tend to have more of this going on than other kinds of reports because you're going to have multiple sections of different types of accounts or different ranges of accounts, and you need to make sure those sections, play nice with each other. They don't create that kind of split like I was showing earlier. Then sort of another variation of this topic is where we have outset totals. And I see a lot of balance sheets formatted like this, and that's why I bring it up in this class, is because sometimes you'll have outset totals where it's like, you have subtotal, and then like a higher level subtotal, and it's off to the right. And that's fine. Just keep in mind that, again, the same rules can apply. So when this top query expands and it goes from 5 rows to 7 rows, it's only going to push down the stuff below columns A through G. Column H, this sum is going to be left behind, right? It's going to stay on row 6. So we want to make sure that we address that the same way by putting in those placeholder formulas so that my sum gets pushed down along with everything else. Okay? And you'll see examples of that in the pre-built financial statements that that are on the launch pad. If you kind of take those apart and look for those things, you'll see examples of these techniques being applied. Okay, and then the first there's the example of that being pushed down.